It's November 23rd, 1982, in Troy Hills, New Jersey. An 18-year-old cheerleader, Amy Hoffman, is excited.
Football is a big deal at Parsippany Hills High School, and the holiday homecoming game is just 2 days away. The popular teenager can't wait to cheer the Vikings to victory.
Amy's mom is going to perm her hair tonight, right after she finishes her shift at the Surprise Store for Women in the Morris County Mall.
Amy Hoffman would never make it to the big game. She wouldn't even make it home.
10 days later, a second young woman is attacked and stabbed to death. The residents of Morris County are terrified.
There was a lot of people that weren't going out, felt that there was a serial killer out there, and it was affecting the whole area.
It's a terrifying mystery, until an unlikely source calls the police to a third stabbing, and Amy's killer is finally caught. Parsippany Troy Hills in Morris County, New Jersey, is a quiet township. Some might even describe it as sleepy.
Parsippany is the largest township in Morris County, population-wise. People went out, they hung out, went out to eat, went out to socialize at clubs and stuff like that. So it was easy going.
Not much happens here outside of local sports and community events, which makes it a great place to raise a family. For Frank and Florence Hoffman, Troy Hills was the perfect little city to settle down in and make a life for their family. Florence Woolrod was a New Jersey girl her whole life. She was born in Hoboken in 1921.
Florence loves carpentry. She is a skilled and dedicated craftsperson. In 1942, when she is 21 years old, Florence marries the love of her life, Frank.
A decade later, the couple purchased their dream home on West Hanover Avenue in Troy Hills. They'd found home.
The Hoffmans have two daughters, Bobby and Kelly. In 1969, Frank and Florence want to expand their family once more.
Frank spent time in Korea as a soldier in the U.S. Army, so the couple decided to adopt a child from the East Asian country.
Amy is 5 years old when she arrives in America. She loves her new life as the third daughter of the Hoffman family.
She was smart and kind. She worked hard, not only in school. She had ethics galore. She had integrity.
By November 1982, Amy has become a tried and true New Jersey girl, just like her mom.
In her senior year, Amy is a popular teenager at Parsippany Hills High School. She's on the cheerleading squad with a tight-knit group of close friends.
In her short span of time, I think she made a difference to quite a few people.
Amy has a part-time job at the Surprise Store for Women at the Morris County Mall in Hanover Township.
It's a busy life and can be a challenge for a high school student. But Amy is full of youthful energy, and she makes it all work.
November 22nd, 1982. 3 days before the big homecoming football game at Parsippany Hills High. On this Monday morning, Amy wakes up not feeling well. She decides to remain home from school and rest up.
Amy spends most of the day talking with her mom. The girls chat about everything under the sun. Now, even though Amy is under the weather, it's really a beautiful time.
The next day, November 23rd, Amy still isn't feeling that great. But Amy will have to press on. Amy gets dressed, says goodbye to her mom, and heads off to class.
Amy arrives at school just in time to have lunch with classmates.
After lunch, Amy and friends get ready for their 2:30 p.m. cheer practice. They want to nail their routine for the big game.
Practice ends at 4:45. Again, Amy's rushing. Now, she's tight on time. Her 4-hour shift at the Sunrise clothing store starts at 5 o'clock.
Amy arrives at the mall shortly after 5 and says hello to Christine Gonzalez, who works at the clothing store next to her.
The shift is uneventful. Amy folds clothes and helps customers choose items to purchase like she always does.
Shortly after 8 p.m., Amy takes a break, grabs some fast food where she catches up with another mall employee.
At 9:20 p.m., it's been a long and busy day for Amy, and she's ready to go home.
As Amy closes up shop, a co-worker asks for a ride home.
Amy would normally offer her friend a lift, but she has plans with her mom to get her hair permed tonight, so she declines.
Later, 2 mall employees will advise police they noticed someone sitting parked alone in a green car with a vinyl roof.
They saw a later model green Chevrolet parked near Amy's car in the parking lot of the mall, and they described a gentleman with dark hair sitting in the car.
Mall workers are sometimes picked up by boyfriends, brothers, and dads, so it's not all that unusual. But this guy stood out.
Apparently, he had been stalking Amy, who worked in a retail store in the mall, because he parked right next to her car, and he knew that she got out of work at 9 o'clock.
After a quick goodbye to coworkers, Amy walks through the mall parking lot to her car.
She's got a lot on her mind, and it's been a long day. Amy doesn't notice that she's being watched.
A lone woman is an easy target for a predator. She can be quickly overwhelmed.
So when Amy went to get into her car, he was there waiting for her.
It's after 10:15 p.m., and Florence Hoffman is worried. Amy is expected home by 9:45. It's not like the punctual teen to be late.
Florence drives to the Morris County Mall to see if she can find Amy.
Around 10:30 that night, Florence discovers Amy's Honda Civic sitting empty in the parking lot.
Amy's book bag is on the seat. The door is unlocked. But Amy is nowhere in sight.
When Florence Hoffman can't find her teenage daughter after her evening shift at a local shopping mall, she calls police in an understandable panic.
When Amy didn't come home, Florence went to the mall and found her car unlocked with the keys in the ignition and her book bag on the seat, but no Amy.
Patrolman William Plate responds to Florence's urgent call just after 10:30 p.m.
Plate brings in Barron, the police dog, to pick up Amy's scent, but just 2 parking spots away, the trail goes cold. If Amy was on foot, she didn't walk far.
Amy worked until after 9 p.m., and the open car with her belongings inside suggests she was there very recently. There's a good chance her scent is fresh.
Patrolman Plate informs Florence that Amy's scent has disappeared, but he vows to continue the search for her missing daughter.
It's Thanksgiving Day, and the big homecoming game is on. The Parsippany Hills High School Vikings are playing the team from neighboring Mount Olive.
The cheerleading squad wave their pom-poms at the crowd and perform the routines they have practiced for hours.
But one cheerleader is conspicuously missing from the field.
Amy Hoffman disappeared without explanation on Tuesday night from the parking lot of the Morris County Mall.
Florence has spent much of the time since then at the police station. She's frantic about her daughter, but there's nothing she can do to help find Amy.
Meanwhile, the big football game is a blowout. The Parsippany High Vikings are crushing Mount Olive, 47-0.
The energy is electric, and the crowd is on their feet. Their beloved team is well on its way to an epic victory.
The celebration won't last very long.
Now, in an isolated area of nearby Randolph Township, surrounded by woods, is the body of Amy Hoffman.
Amy's found floating in an old-fashioned holding tank in the old Mendham Waterworks.
her body was found in a remote area of Randolph, New Jersey, which is a neighboring town. And it was in a area where there were concrete basins that used to collect water in the woods.
The public is told that Amy's body is found fully clothed in the reservoir. They can't explain how she died. But psychic detective Nancy Weber knows right away that's not true.
I said, okay, why does the newspaper lie?
Nancy Weber has a vision of Amy Hoffman, an innocent victim of a vicious rape and murder.
I saw a dead body naked with knife wounds all over, young, beautiful, and the feel of her was incredibly gentle. I simply knew that was murder.
Amy had been stabbed twice in the chest. Her right ear was severed. The wound was so deep it extended through all of her soft tissue to the spinal column.
Nearby, there's about an 18 by 9 inch pool of blood on the sandy ground, and a trail of blood leading to the tank.
The pattern of blood shows Amy was likely stabbed and then dragged into the tank.
She had defensive marks on her hands. That shows she put up a fight, trying to grasp the blade of the knife.
But with those deep stab wounds and her ear cut off, she would have been losing blood and energy fast.
It's one of the most horrific and brutal murders local detectives have witnessed. The Randolph Township community is in shock. Their worst fears have been realized. Amy Hoffman, popular cheerleader, responsible employee, and model student, missing for 2 days, has been kidnapped and murdered. It's a huge hole in the safety net of the family-friendly community.
There was a lot of people that weren't going out because they were afraid of what was going on.
If something like this could happen to Amy, it might happen to anyone.
And just 10 days later, it does. It's Thanksgiving 1982, and the New Jersey community of Parsippany Troy Hills is reeling from the news of 18-year-old Amy Hoffman's vicious murder.
Amy was a popular cheerleader, a responsible part-time employee, and a model student.
Abducted outside the Morris County Mall, she was raped, stabbed, and her body left floating in an old holding tank outside of town. Police begin piecing together clues, taking interviews at the crime scenes, at the mall where she worked, and in the woods where she was found. The description of a dark-haired man in a green car idling in the mall parking lot on November 23rd give police a rough description of the suspect. A couple of witnesses described seeing headlights or heard a car engine on Combs Hollow Road in the vicinity of the holding tank where Amy died. But no specific descriptions on the vehicle.
The autopsy of Amy Hoffman reveals the presence of sperm on her body. The teenager was sexually assaulted before she died. DNA is not considered a reliable source of forensic evidence in 1982. So while the information gives police a clear picture of the last horrifying moments of Amy's life, it doesn't bring them closer to her killer.
12 days after Amy Hoffman goes missing, local woman Deirdre O'Brien is finishing her shift at a local restaurant called The Library. At 25, Deirdre is an aspiring museum curator. She recently graduated from Seton Hall University with a major in art history. For now, she lives at home with her parents, James and Georgina, in the Mount Olive Township of Morris County.
After a long double shift at the restaurant called The Library on December 5th, Deirdre's relieved to take off the apron and make her way through the parking lot to her car.
Deirdre is unaware a lone man follows her to her car shortly after midnight.
he had been, stalking this woman at the library and followed her out.
As Deidre gets closer to home, her car's forced off the road by another vehicle.
She was almost home when he forced her off the side of the road with his car. And then he abducted her and put her into the trunk of his car.
Deidre was driven in the trunk of the car to a small rest stop on Interstate 80 in Alamuchi.
Probably 30 miles away from where she was abducted. He drove around for a while, I would say 40 minutes to an hour. It was a rest area, and not a very large rest area.
The man took Deidre out of the trunk and forced her into the backseat of his car and made her strip down naked.
It was like he was going to have sex with her, and she kept fighting him. So he got upset with her or whatever, and he stabbed her and he threw her out of the car in the parking lot of the rest area, and he took off.
Deidre was bleeding badly. She saw a semi-trailer parked at the other end of the rest stop and managed to get herself over to the truck cab.
The driver is napping inside. He wakes up and sees a naked woman who is bleeding badly. He wraps her, trying to give her comfort.
The truck driver covered her and she thanked him.
Deirdre tries to tell the truck driver details about the man who attacked her.
The truck driver got a description of the tail end of the car as it was leaving.
Deirdre was a totally exceptional human being, up through her last breath, describing him. She didn't want anybody else to be hurt like that.
He did all he could for her.
But unfortunately, she died before help could get there.
Morris County is already on high alert after the brutal rape and murder of Amy Hoffman.
The news of Deidre O'Brien's killing just before Christmas sends the community into a state of near panic.
After the second killing, which was Deidre, it was just before Christmas. People were afraid to go out to the malls to go shopping.
Families across Morris County are terrified for their daughters and sisters. Is the same killer responsible for murdering these young women?
They felt that there was a serial killer out there. It was affecting the whole area.
Officers were being asked by women what they should do if a knife is thrust into their ribs, or how to respond if a car tries to run them off the road.
About 150 women attend a self-defense seminar, learning to go for the eyes and throat and kick to the groin. Pocket-sized pepper spray canisters flew off store shelves.
Deirdre O'Brien was killed at a rest stop on the interstate highway system, in the jurisdiction adjacent to where Amy Hoffman died.
Deirdre O'Brien was also found abducted and murdered on Route 80 at a rest stop.
Detective Hughes and Detective Moore meet as the Morris County Task Force is formed to tackle the horrifying cases.
And there were about 100 detectives from all the police departments in the county that attended this meeting.
I happened to hook up with Detective Captain from the Parsippany Troy Hills Police Department, Jim Moore, and we got to talking.
Bill Hughes came to me and asked if he could team up with me, and I said, sure.
Detectives Hughes and Moore know they are up against a dangerous murderer who is likely to kill again soon.
So State Police, Morris County got together. They felt they had a serial killer in the making.
It's January 1983, and the past 2 months have horrified the residents of Morris County.
First, high school senior Amy Hoffman was abducted and murdered after working a shift at the Morris County Mall. Her body was dumped in a concrete holding tank.
Then, just 12 days later, 25-year-old Deidre O'Brien was forced off the road, abducted, and stabbed to death at an interstate rest stop.
There was a lot of people that felt that there was a serial killer out there, and it was affecting the whole area.
Community members raised money to encourage witnesses to come forward. A reward for helping find Amy Hoffman's killer reaches $8,500. And a reward for information in connection with the homicide of Deidre O'Brien goes up to $24,000.
Task Force detectives are certain the killer will strike again, and soon. Detective Bill Hughes tells James Moore about a psychic detective, Nancy Weber, who might be able to help.
I mentioned to him about Nancy. I asked him how he felt about psych. I'd seen Nancy work before, and she did some pretty amazing stuff. I says, you know, Jim, I says, we're probably going to have a lot of time. I says, would you be interested in talking to Nancy? And he was all in.
Bill was from a different department at that time. He mentioned to me Nancy Weber, and would I be interested in meeting her? So I said, okay, I'll keep an open mind.
At their first meeting, Weber told Moore details about Amy Hoffman's killing that the public could not know.
She started telling me how after he raped her, and then he stabbed her and killed her, and none of that was revealed to the public, but it was true.
Detective Hughes and Moore decide to work with Nancy Weber to solve the case any way they possibly can. Meanwhile, Task Force detectives gather one piece of material evidence from the O'Brien crime scene. An impression of tire treads left on a muddy verge.
The tracks were left next to Deidre's car at the place it was forced off the road when she was abducted.
Her car was still sitting on the side of the road where he left it.
Detective John Kinnacum of the Morris County Sheriff's Division notes that the tire tracks form a distinctive pattern.
There was a tire print in the dirt that was noticed, and they took a casting of it.
After comparing the tire casting to hundreds of others, Kinnacum can't find a match for the unique tread.
Detectives Hughes and Moore take psychic Nancy Weber for long drives in the country around the crime scenes.
We just drove around the area, and she says, "What town are we in now?" I said, "Well, we're in Mendham, Nancy." And she says, "He doesn't like this police department. There's a guy on here that he can't stand." Then she started describing how he had been stopped by one of the police officers in the town.
She started to describe the individual as being Eastern Europe descent, tall, dark hair, chiseled chin. She said there's a hard K in his last name, and I think his first name is James, but I'm not sure. He comes from the Morristown area, but he went to Florida, and while he was in Florida, he murdered someone and went to jail.
At 11:20 p.m. on January 16th, police get the call they feared was coming. A third person has been attacked, but this time, the victim is alive. Patrolman Kevin Dormer and Sergeant Paul Percolis arrive at 44 Harrison Street in Morristown and meet Julia Baldwin and her son James Kodayich.
James is a 34-year-old supervisor at a nearby apartment complex who lives with his mother and stepfather.
Very early Sunday morning, I got a phone call from headquarters. They said, Morris Township Police Department got a call that a guy had been stabbed.
James has a stab wound on his lower back.
So when they responded to the alleged stabbing, they met this guy, James Kodayich, and he showed them stab wounds that he had in his back. And they asked how did that happen.
James tells police he was driving home on Route 24 in Morris Township when a car with a flashing blue light came up from behind.
Believing it was the police, James pulled over and got out of his car. Now, the driver of the other car got out too, and the two men met on the side of the road. James says the man chastised him for driving too slowly.
When James turned to go back to his own car, he said he felt a blow to his back. He was able to slide behind the steering wheel of his car, and that's where he felt blood.
He drove straight home and called 911. Sergeant Percalis issues an alert to other departments in the area. The killer they're looking for could be nearby and could strike again at any time.
This new attack took place less than a mile from the spot where Deidre O'Brien was abducted.
The details are so similar to the O'Brien and Hoffman murders: cars on the road, unprovoked attacks, and stab wounds.
But something doesn't add up.
The wound on James Kadajich's back is superficial. It might even be self-inflicted.
As police officers, we have to follow the evidence, even when it seems unthinkable. And this time, the killer the police have been looking for might actually be the victim who's standing right in front of them.
And while they were talking to him, one of the officers noticed this green Chevrolet sitting in the driveway and called for the forensic unit from the sheriff's department.
He tried to stage it like he was a victim of the person who we were looking for.
Forensic Detective James Kinnacombe was called to the scene and began an evaluation of James Kadajich's green sedan.
Kinnacombe, he was the crime scene investigator. Yeah, he's the one that did all the forensic collection on Kadajich's car.
Detective Kinnacombe had ordered the plaster cast of tire treads found in the mud near the spot where Deidre O'Brien's car was abandoned.
So while they were talking to this James Kadadich in his driveway, the forensic team came and matched the casting of that tire print to his tire on his car.
And when the investigators got there, they started putting two and two together.
It's shocking. The man who called police to report that he was attacked by Amy and Deidre's killer may himself be the man who murdered them both.
Police seize James Kadajich's green Chevrolet sedan and take it in for a full forensic examination.
After they did forensic work on the car, they found hairs from Amy and Deidre O'Brien. Hairs were found in the back seat of the car for Amy. Hairs from Deidre O'Brien were found in the trunk.
A seat cover as well as pieces of the carpet are sent to the FBI lab in Washington, D.C. to be tested for Amy Hoffman's and Deidre O'Brien's DNA.
The pieces are falling into place now. Officers have enough evidence to charge James Kadajich and hold him in custody to protect the public from further risk.
So that's how he was arrested and charged with the crimes.
At 1:20 a.m. on January 19th, 1983, James Kadajich is arrested and charged with the abduction and murder of 25-year-old Deidre O'Brien. He is held on a $250,000 bond.
Why would Kadajic pretend to be attacked by a killer who turns out to be him?
My opinion is, I think he was just trying to point the investigators in a different direction, take the heat off himself.
Kadajich had recently been pulled over and given a summary traffic ticket.
Just as psychic Nancy Weber had suggested, Kadajic had recently been in trouble with local police for a traffic violation.
He knew they were looking at him hard based on that traffic stop, so I think he was trying to divert the attention away from him.
And Kadajic had killed 2 times before, one of which he spent time in prison in Florida before he killed Amy Hoffman and Deidre O'Brien, just as Weber predicted. A Florida parole board decided to release him.
This is a man who killed 2 people. What were they thinking? So Amy should never have been killed due to a parole board's inappropriate behavior.
You got to wonder what the parole board considered, when they considered his release.
In the winter of 1982, the residents of Quiet Morris County, New Jersey, are consumed with fear. Just days apart, popular high school cheerleader Amy Hoffman, 18, and 25-year-old art major Deidre O'Brien are abducted from their cars, sexually assaulted, and stabbed to death. Police are running short of leads and turn to a psychic detective for insight when a 3rd victim comes forward to say he was stabbed on the road.
34-year-old James Kadiach said he was pulled over in his car and stabbed without warning.
Police note that his green car matches the one described by witnesses around the locations where the abductions and murders occurred.
Tire treads on James Kadiach's car match those found on the side of the road where Deidre O'Brien's car was abandoned on the night of her murder.
Seat cover and carpets from Kadiach's vehicle are sent to an FBI testing facility in Washington, D.C. The results confirm Deidre O'Brien's DNA are on both items.
On May 12, 1983, after being held behind bars for 4 months, James Kadiach is formally charged for the murder of Deidre O'Brien. Months later, on December 15, 1983, Kadiach is charged with the murder of Amy Hoffman.
The community of Parsippany Hills breathes a collective sigh of relief. The killer that terrorized their community is behind bars.
The more they learned about James Kadiach, the more they realized how truly dangerous it was when he was roaming free around them.
This is not the first time James Kadiach has been charged with a horrific crime.
James Kadiach had killed twice, but only convicted of homicide once before. He was convicted of second-degree murder and had spent 11 years behind bars for killing his roommate, 40-year-old Robert Anderson.
In 1971, Kadiach is living with Anderson in Dade County, Florida.
Kadiach claimed Robert Anderson made unwanted sexual advances towards him, and the two men got into an argument. Kadiach killed his roommate and hid his body in a closet.
Then, while in prison, James killed another inmate. The murder was ruled self-defense, and he was never formally charged.
A Florida parole board releases Kadiach from prison just 5 months before the murder of Amy Hoffman.
Somehow he got out. When he came back, he was living back where he grew up, and his uncle owned a gas station in Wharton.
Thanks to Nancy Weber's insights, detectives Hughes and Moore were getting close to catching Kadiach. And then he called the cops on himself.
So we were on the right track, and we were probably going to discover on Monday who this guy was, but he went and stabbed himself Saturday night. We never got to that point.
Weber says she heard rumors about Kadiach's disturbing behavior as a youth.
I know he grew up troubled. He would burn animals. He would go into the woods, take animals and kill them. Domestic animals.
Detective Moore went to see Kadiach in custody. It's a chilling experience he cannot forget.
Scary. When he was looking at me, I felt that he was looking completely through me. His eyes were really the weirdest eyes I've ever seen. He kind of like just stared straight at you. And it was creepy. I've never seen anybody look like he did.
Kadiach's apprehension was a huge relief for Morris County residents.
When the news came out in the papers and on TV that he was apprehended, there was a lot of people who were relieved that we had caught him. So the general feeling was relief.
The pain James would inflict was not over.
In another twist of the knife, he pleaded not guilty to killing Amy Hoffman.
Amy's family will have to endure a trial where they will be forced to relive the worst days of their lives and hear the devastating details of her death in open court.
The trial for Amy Hoffman's murder begins on October 9th, 1984. Despite James Kadiach's claims of innocence, the state believes the case they have against him is strong.
It will be up to the 7-man, 5-woman jury to ultimately decide Kadiach's fate.
Examination of Amy Hoffman's body showed she had engaged in sexual activity sometime in the 24 hours before she died.
The last day of Amy's life was well documented. Her family and friends knew where she was at all times.
Employees of the Morris County Mall who saw Amy leave work that November night she disappeared told the jury about a green-colored vehicle sitting in the parking lot.
James Kadiach and his car both matched the description given by the witness.
Prosecutors showed the jury that fibers found on Amy's sweater and skirt matched fibers found inside James's vehicle.
There's a lot of physical evidence connecting James Kadiach to this crime.
Outside of the physical evidence, the prosecution tries to enter into evidence a photo album found at James's house. It's filled with pictures of Asian women. Amy was adopted from Korea.
The judge disallowed the circumstantial evidence. It was a blow to the prosecution, but they hope the physical evidence that they put forward is enough to convince the jury.
James' lawyer is determined to pick apart the state's case against his client. James is innocent, he says, and his own presentation of the facts will prove it.
The defense called James's stepbrother, David Baldwin, to the stand.
David Baldwin said that he was with James the night of Amy's murder. He said James couldn't have murdered Amy because he was at home, upstairs, playing video games. James's own mother, Julia Baldwin, testified that she was also in the home that night and corroborated that James was indeed playing video games until 11 o'clock p.m.
Next, Dr. John Refner, principal research microscopist for American Cyanamid, takes the stand.
Refner tells the jury the polyester fibers found on Amy Hoffman's skirt were similar, but not identical to those of the seat covers in James Kadajich's car.
Since Amy Hoffman worked in a clothing store, Refner suggests the fibers on her clothes could have come from many places.
Lastly, the defense pointed a finger directly at another man. In a voir dire, the defense introduces evidence connected to Kevin Sheehan, an assistant football coach at Parsippany Hills High School.
Kevin was known to make obscene calls to cheerleaders using a payphone outside the locker room.
Kevin tells the court that he did make the calls to cheerleaders. The judge considers Sheehan's testimony, but rules it inadmissible.
None of Kevin's phone calls were made to Amy Hoffman herself, and there was nothing else to connect Kevin Sheehan to her murder.
The jury has a lot to consider. There is strong evidence pointing to James Kadajich's guilt.
But they have also heard testimony that suggests he is not Amy Hoffman's killer.
On October 25, 1984 at 11:20 a.m., the jury retires to deliberate. It's been a day and a half since the jury in the murder trial of Amy Hoffman left to decide the fate of her accused killer, James Kadajich. Then word comes in. They have reached a verdict.
Amy Hoffman's family is nervous. They know there are holes in the case. And James Kadajich insists he's innocent.
At 3:05 p.m. on October 26, 1984, the jury foreman reads the verdict.
Kadajich is found guilty on all counts. Knowing and purposeful murder, killing in the course of committing kidnapping or aggravated sexual assault, and possession of a dangerous weapon for unlawful purpose.
Amy Hoffman's family is relieved. At least there is justice for her brutal and senseless death.
7 months later, James Kadajich is convicted of the murder of Deidre O'Brien in May 1985.
Initially sentenced to death, James's sentence was commuted to 2 30-year terms for his crimes in Trenton, New Jersey, with no chance of parole.
I felt very relieved because we all felt that he was going to continue to kill till we caught him. Although he had taken 2 lives, I felt really relieved that he wasn't going to hurt anybody else.
Today, the only thing that remains of a killer terrorizing young women in the 1980s is a beautiful legacy.
Deidre's father, Jim, used his grief at losing his daughter as a catalyst to support other victims of crime. And in April 1996, Deidre's house opened its doors.
Deidre's House is a child advocacy center for abused children, helping more than 32,000 child victims of abuse or neglect, or kids that have witnessed violence.
Psychic detective Nancy Weber did not solve these terrible crimes, but detectives Hughes and Moore are convinced she was helping them get close to James Kadajich.
If I was a lead investigator, I would never discourage it. If they point you in a direction you never even thought about going, you've got to go out and dig a little bit and develop probable cause.
To be honest with you, I never believed in psychics until I met Nancy. She made a believer out of me.
It doesn't matter if they believe me or not. I'm not there to convince anybody anything. I'm just doing my job. My job happens to be a little different than somebody else's in that capacity.
From a task force case involving 2 brutal murders to a hot tip from an alleged victim, this sleepy bedroom community can rest again when a killer is finally caught.